Good afternoon to another of our virtual sessions of Ask a Master Gardener. My name is Pat, and I am today's moderator, and I'm a graduate of the 2005 Master Gardener class. We are so happy you could join us today and look forward to helping you with your gardening questions. Well, it is now officially spring, and you look outside and say, what do we do now? We know that the amount of winter rains we have been disappointing. So what do we do with our gardens? I think we kind of have quit binge watching during the winter and now taking a look thinking, oh my gosh, I got so much to do. I personally, one of my projects is to take a look at my irrigation system, and knowing that I may need to make adjustments this year, knowing that this winter rain pattern may be with us to stay in the future. And, plus I kid everyone because I said, I think I've now set up a habitat for the moles in my yard. So that's another issue. As master gardeners, I think we are always looking at the problems that arise in our own landscapes and gardens and are trying to solve them. So as such, we are open to any questions you may have because we have probably dealt with the same problems ourselves before at some point in time. So we are always here and available to help you with whatever gardening questions and problems you may have. First of all, let me go over today's ground rules. We ask, first of all, that you mute your audio and turn off your video. You'll find those controls either in your lower left-hand corner or upper right-hand corner of your screen, depending on what device you're using. We ask that if you want to ask a question, to please use the chat box to type in any questions you may have. Please remain muted unless on some occasions we may ask you a person to unmute to clarify a question that we need further clarification on. But otherwise, please stay muted. Some questions that we were already submitted at the time that people registered, and those we will address first, and then we'll move on to those in the chat box. Today's session, let you know, will be recorded. So if this is a concern, you might want to go ahead and leave the session, and you can watch the recording later on YouTube under Sonoma County Master Gardeners. I think moving on then about the organization. The Sonoma County Master Gardeners is an organization that has been serving home gardeners for almost 40 years. We are made up of over 240 volunteers that have been trained to the University of California at Davis. Our mission has always been to use the most current, unbiased, research-based information to help the home gardener to find answers to issues as diverse as creating edible food gardens, choosing plants, and reducing pesticides or using pesticides safely, to preparing your home to be fire resistant. And we ask that you visit our website, and we'll show the link to it to learn about what we do. And there's a wealth of information out there for anything practically that you can think of in gardening. In today's meeting, you'll be seeing myself as the moderator and today's panelists who will be responding to your questions. Behind the scenes, we have a team of master gardeners doing real-time research to facilitate answering any questions, and a host to manage the slides and on-screen presentation, and finally a gatekeeper to ensure access and manage attendance. So to begin, let me begin by introducing today's panelists. We have Penny and Roger. Penny graduated in the Master Gardener class of 2014 and is the content editor for the Master Gardener website. She writes 2 weekly Facebook posts titled On Penny's Farm and Time to Read. Prior to COVID, and hopefully after COVID, she is frequently found at the Occidental Farmers Market at the Master Gardener information desk there. Outside of Master Gardeners, she is actively involved in fire safety and reduction efforts in Occidental and West County. Roger's interest plants started very young with his grandparents' vegetable garden in Palo Alto. Roger has a Bachelor of Science in Ornamental Horticulture from Cal Poly in San Luis Obispo. And he has worked as a landscaper, managed retail and wholesale nurseries, and loves tree pruning. Since retiring in 2012, he has been helping friends with their gardens and irrigation systems. Roger is from the Sonoma County Master Gardener class of 2020. As promised, when advertising this month's session, we said we would give a short lead-in presentation on gardening tools. By the way, before we go into this, I do want to say that when we do answer questions today, well, as soon as I figure out where Cleo's going to land up here. Anyway, as promised, when advertising this month's session, we said we would give a short lead-in presentation on gardening tools. We have Ellen with us today to give us this overview, and I now turn this over to Ellen.
Hi, I'm Ellen, and I'm happy everybody is here to attend our virtual farmers market. I'm sure you are like me, and now that spring has come, we go to our garage, or we go to our tool shed, or we go wherever we store tools, and we're looking at the tools that are hanging or lying around and wondering, what do we do next? So we're going to talk about tools. We're going to cover more than hoes and horis. We're going to cover basic gardening tools, favorite tools, what works and what doesn't, garden aids, and keeping tools for the long run. So let's get started. I want to call your attention here to the latest from UC IPM, which is Integrated Pest Management. When buying any tool, weigh the benefits of high quality and a durable tool with the ease of carrying it and the risks of damaging or losing it in your garden or on your property. I know that I find trowels from 2 and 3 years ago frequently, and I'm glad I didn't spend that much on that. It's a QR link, and this is a publication that just came out in February called Best Management Practices for Non-Chemical Weed Control. So in this book, it goes into great detail of different tools and what they used for and pros and cons. I think you might enjoy it. So how do you choose the right tool? You are looking at a multi-generational collection of shovels. This has been in Roger's family, and this is not the full picture. This has been in Roger's family for many years. Now, you can see the tools come in a variety of shapes, lengths, and weight. Many are task specific, and many can be used interchangeably. And the publication that we referenced at the beginning gives a very good description of why you want to use a rounded shovel or a flat shovel. It's a good idea to research. Watch videos before making your investment in a specific tool, as only you know what your purpose is going to be. You're looking at 4 different hoes. And the point of this slide is when you go to your local hardware store and decide that you want a hoe, you're going to look at a wall that has at least 4, if not more, different hoes. So how do you know which is the right hoe? It can be very confusing. And again, there are resources that will tell you, such as that publication, what to use when. One of our favorites is the Hula Hoe, and it's also known as the loop, stirrup, or scuffle hoe. Ideally, the sharp blade skims horizontally below the soil surface. Weed roots get sliced and the soil is not disturbed, which is very important. So here we have a hula hoe in action. Here, our master gardener is removing annual bluegrass from a gravel path that also has some aggressive California poppies. So basically you're scraping back and forth and back and forth, and you would be amazed how fast you detach these things that you don't want from your pathway, and it's much easier than being on your knees. So we move on to sharpness. It's very, very important to start with tools that are sharp. Looking at the roots of a spurge that have been severed using a sharpened shovel, the result is minimal soil disturbance. And you will hear me say that over and over again, is that we really don't want to disturb the soil. There are very beneficial microbes and networks in the soil. So the least soil disturbance that you can manage is the ideal way to go about this. So another favorite, here's a hori hori. I don't know how many people in the audience have heard of hori horis or possess a hori hori. This is used in all aspects of gardening. You can tear open bags of soil. You can dig holes in raised beds for edibles that you're planting. And in the rest of your garden to plant natives. You can dig up weeds. You can chop off plant material. You can even cut tomato worms in half or smash snails. So this is a tool that is very all-purpose, and many of our master gardeners say it's essential. And you can find one in your local hardware store. Here's a hori hori in action. Our gardener is on her knees in this situation and using the hori hori to displace, it looks like California poppies. There's a jagged side for tougher cutting tasks, a smoother side for minor cutting, and a point on the blade for digging. We have Roger, one of our panelists here, using his favorite tools. Roger, tell us about the Leatherman.
The Leatherman is very similar to a Swiss Army knife that I used to have a long time ago. It has on it a pair of pliers, a wire cutter. This particular model, and there's a lot of different ones, screwdriver. It's got a tree saw. It's got scissors in it. So when I'm out and about, no matter what I'm doing, this lets me do jobs really quick.
Oh, okay. Roger's also holding a pruner, and we'll get to that in a few moments. Okay, here we are. Hand pruners. Pruners and loppers are available either as an anvil or a bypass type. Anvil types have one blade that cuts through the stem against a flat surface, hence it's called the anvil. Bypass types have curved blades that overlap when the tool is closed to cut using a shearing motion. I've been told that the bypass blades work better if you're, let's say, cutting in a cutting garden where you have flowers that you want to cut and bring in, that there's less damage to the stem. But you need to hold these in your hand, feel the balance, feel the weight, and see what you're comfortable with. Here is a lopper. A lopper is really a heavy-duty pruner with long handles. Loppers are tools with longer handles that offer more leverage and larger blades than hand pruners. So you would be using your loppers to make cuts in any branch larger than the circumference of your finger. Loppers come in both bypass and anvil styles and work the same way as pruners. I also need to warn you a little bit that you don't want to cut anything of a diameter maybe more than 2 inches or 2 to 3 inches, because you will risk bending the long arms and damaging the blade. Okay, we now are into trowels. Note the measurements on the face of the tool for planting at specified depths. So if you are putting bulbs in the spring for the summer, or you're putting bulbs in the, for the fall, for the following spring, you can see that there are marks, because some bulbs get planted at 2 inches, other bulbs get planted at 4 inches or 6 inches. And this is a handy way of gauging planting bulbs. A gardening trowel is quite basic in comparison to the hori-hori. It's generally designed for digging small holes, breaking up earth, mixing in fertilizer, and transferring plants to pots. Next slide, please. Okay, here we have shears. These are my favorite shears. They are imported from Japan. They are lightweight and very, very sharp. And you can get shears with much longer handles and handles that are retractable. So you need to look at shears carefully and see, whether the weight matters, what length you need, how far you're reaching. These are very well adapted for trimming borders, boxwood type hedges, bush-like shrubs such as yews and ornamental grasses, and leftover perennials, as you can see. Here is an exotic tool. This is a Kusatori Ichiban Weeder. And this is recommended for pulling out weeds, especially ones growing in tight spaces. It has a very high quality steel blade coated with chrome. Now, this is one of Penny's favorites. So Penny, maybe you could tell us a little bit about it.
This is a nice little small tool, great for old hands, but it only works when when you can move it through the soil. So in my clay soil, it'll work for maybe as much as a week after rain, probably not quite that long, or in the vegetable beds where it's where there's lots of compost, or any place there's lots of compost to keep the soil friable. But those hooks will pull out a taproot beautifully, or cut through something a little more fibrous. And generally you get the plant out with the roots and not much dirt.
Oh, okay.
Cool.
Now, Penny's going to stick around to tell us what works and what doesn't. Penny has an article on our webpage that you can find under the, I believe, the food gardening section. What is the name of the article, Penny?
I think it is weeding tools. It's listed in the chat. I can see it there.
Oh, okay. So
I don't think it's in food gardening.
Tell us about what we're looking at.
Well, the one on the left is just a plain large screwdriver, the largest screwdriver you can find. It is one of the most useful garden tools, whether you're looking down and trying to find a gopher and probing the soil, or whether you're digging up a hard weed in tough soil. I just always have it in my tool bucket. Next one over is a little hand hoe. To be honest, I really haven't found it very useful in my yard. The one in the middle there is one of my very, very favorite tools. It's kind of a little hoe that you pull through the ground, and you have to be on your knees. So it's a weeder when you're down eye level with the weeds or the chicken that's in front of you. And you can use it to cut through the roots, and it'll take out quite a few weeds quite fast. I like that tool a lot. Again, not if the soil's too dry and hard, the clay, it's not so good. Next one is a funny little pair of sort of tweezery things that's absolutely fabulous in loose soil for things with tap roots, not big plants, small plants, but it's a really great tool. And the one on the right, I have not found useful. It doesn't get the same grip. You have to kind of twist things around to get it to hold. So not one of my favorites.
But as you can see, some tools can be as simple as a screwdriver, and others can be highly engineered, such as the Ichiban tool that we talked about before. Can we have the next slide? Okay, we're ready to talk about some garden aids. We all need to sit down at times. The three-legged stool that our master gardener is sitting on is a fold-up device, and it has a strap, and you can sling it over your shoulder if you're heading off, you know, somewhere distant from your house. The foldable bench works for kneeling and sitting, and it collapses into this small size, and then you either kneel on it and reverse it to sit on it. The side supports that come up when you're kneeling are excellent for getting up from ground level. I would hope that you're, given the investment that you've made in your tools, that you're going to keep them for the long run. So it's critical to clean, dry, sharpen, and oil. Very, very important. Now, you don't have to use the products that are, you know, in this picture, but if we get to the next slide, I can give you a little more detail, okay? First of all, don't forget to oil your wooden handles and sand if necessary, because they can dry out and split as well as damage your hands. So in terms of cleaning, a damp rag or a quick spray from the hose may be all that you need. If mud is caked on, a barbecue grill brush works well to thoroughly clean caked on dirt. Wipe down the tool with a dry towel or let it air dry. After the tool is dry, spray or lightly coat it with vegetable spray like Pam or another plant-based oil to prevent rust. You don't want to be using machine oil on your tools where you might be eating something that you have cut recently. Sanitation is very, very important practice. And by sanitizing your tools, you will prevent the spread of viruses, cankers, and vascular system diseases. So in the picture before, I used Lysol. You can use Clorox, but Clorox you need to be careful with because you need to be using it at a very dilute 1 to 10 solution. You can use alcohol. You can use, you know, a homemade bleach solution. But it's important that you recognize that chlorine can be very corrosive and can cause pitting to your pruner's blades over time. And these pits may harbor microbes that damage the plants. So if using a bleach solution or Clorox, be sure to clean your tools with soap and water before putting them away. And then of course, to oil them. Let's go on. The tools that were shown in the picture are not the only tools that need care. These tools need sharpening and oiling when necessary if they're moving parts. Here are several places that you could take a look. The UC Master Gardeners of Santa Clara have a very good video of how to clean and sharpen pruning tools. The UC Master Gardeners of San Diego have a garden tool care page. And there's a new article by the Butte County Master Gardeners in their section called The Real Dirt about maintaining your garden tools. So you could see this is a very timely topic. with that, we end our presentation and hope you enjoy your time in the garden.
Thank you, Ellen. And I wanted to remind everybody that, you know, the link to Penny's article on the tools has been posted in the chat box. So the link is there. In addition, as we run through some of the answers to, especially to the questions you submitted, we will post in the chat box links to some of the references for those answers. And in addition, what will happen is we'll create a PDF file also that you will be able to find, like I said, all of these recordings, they go out onto the YouTube under Sonoma County Master Gardeners. And if you look under comments there, you'll see a PDF file, and it will also have all the references listed, just so that makes it easy for everyone. Okay. With that being said, we'll start with today's questions. And like I said, we will be starting with what was pre-submitted. And for the first question, what I did was I grouped a few together because everybody wanted the number one answer, what to do with gophers. They've mentioned gopher problems with eating things, tearing up lawns with gopher mounds and weeds. And I think we got questions from Brenda, David, and Barbara. All three of them had gopher questions. So I'll turn it over to the panelists.
You want to take that, Penny?
Sure, I will start with the gophers. I live in West County. I have many, many, many gophers and moles and whatever else is out there, voles. So I spend a fair bit of my time chasing gophers. Sometimes it's very frustrating, but you know, on the whole, that are my pet turkey vultures get quite a few gophers to eat. I am in favor of trapping. Most of there are sort of folk remedies like Wrigley's chewing gum and the wrappers. They don't work. The only thing that really works is trapping. And there are multiple kinds of traps. I've tried quite a few of them, but I'm old. My hands don't work that well. So I have one variety that I really like, and it's called Trapline. And I'm going to show them to you. I think, if I can get it right, there we go. They come in 3 sizes, which is why I like them so much. And they come in mole and large mole and gopher. And what I do is I put the trap in, use the trap that fits the hole best. I'll start with the largest one. If I can't get it in, I'll go to the middle one. And if I can't get it in, I'll go to the small one. And you'll see that on the larger one, I've attached it to a wire and a ground staple. I get that there better. There. And that's also really necessary because critters are going to go after your gopher if you catch it. And you don't want them to take your trap away. So you want to staple it down hard on a length of wire or nylon fishing line. And I put a bright colored contractor's tape on the top of it because I forget where I put these things. I've got 5 acres and I lose traps all the time. So I need the marker on the top to tell me where the traps are. But other than that, it's a question of patience. I mean, I think there's lots of literature which would tell you which is a gopher hole and which is a mole hole. And you need to dig it back as far best you can to the main tunnel. I do have friends that just stick the trap down the side tunnel, but you're better off in the main tunnel, and it usually has 2 directions, so you have to put a trap on each side. Do you want to add anything to that, Roger?
The other thing is that you want to go for the freshest mound that you can find, because that's where the activity is. And if you set traps and within a day you don't have any activity, you need to keep moving on. You need to go where the animals are.
And sometimes for me it'll take more than a day. I guess, you know, some depends on how long the trap is, but I would never, if I don't get it the first day, I'll leave it at least another day.
Great.
Okay, good, thanks. Now I expect everyone to not have a gopher problem. Okay, the next question we have is from Maria, and she wants to find out how to prune various things. The first one being well-established wisteria.
I'll take that one. Wisteria comes in several different forms, Chinese, Japanese. The Chinese tends to be the most vigorous. So depending on where you have it, you may want to take out the dead parts of it. You may want to take out, you know, where it's headed up towards something like the top of say an overhang or a window. And then after it flowers, which is going to come up this spring, you want to cut back the shoot to say five leaflets that are there. And then when it comes in the fall, or not the fall, but in this winter, you want to cut back to say 2 to 3 buds, which will then be the flower buds for the next year. Wisteria is something that you grows so fast, especially through the spring and summer, that will be long runners. And depending on where they are, you may have to go through and keep cutting those off because they get in the way. So beautiful flowers, it can be a lot of work.
Okay.
Do you have anything to add, Penny?
No, I'm not a wisteria grower, so.
And by the way, in the end of summer, when those seeds snap, you'll think you're being shot. But anyway, the next thing Rhea wanted to know about pruning is large fuchsia bush.
Do you want to take that, Roger? I'm not a fuchsia grower either.
Fuchsias are a beautiful plant. I would imagine around here, I don't grow them here in Sebastopol, that they don't tolerate the cold very well. So you may have them in pots and have to move them in, or you may have to cover them so that they don't freeze. The fuchsias can be grown as a shrub. They can be grown as in a basket. They can also be trained up on a trellis, or you can make them into a small tree. What you want to do on the shrubs is in the spring after the last frost is go through and cut them off, say a foot or so above the soil, and the plants will shoot up and you'll end up with the new plant, and it'll be about the same size as it was the previous year. You may want to, through the season, cut out any of the disease damaged limbs that are in there. Now on the baskets, what you want to do is in the spring, cut back to the edge of the pot that you've got it in. And then as it starts to develop, pinch it to fill out the basket. And then you'll have the flowers for the season. They're beautiful plants, but we tend to be pretty cold around here.
Thanks, Roger. And the final thing she wanted to know about pruning is plum trees.
You want to do that, Penny?
Sure. A plum tree depends a little bit on how old the tree is. If you have a young tree that you want it to grow larger, then you probably want to prune it a little earlier, early spring before it flowers, late winter, early spring. But if it's a mature plum tree and you don't want it to grow much larger, then you want to prune it in summer after it's fruited. And that way that will discourage it from growing, and you'll be able to control the size of your tree better.
Okay, thanks. The next set of questions we have is from Brenda. The first question is, she mentions that she has hibiscus in pots that are not doing well after winter chill.
hibiscus is truly a tropical plant. So was it Brenda, I think, was asking the question?
Yes.
You must have it in an area that's protected so you're probably protecting it from the frost. They're very particular with their growing conditions. They want a really loose soil. They want to have adequate moisture through the year. And you can prune them back down, say a third of their height in the spring. And so I would say for your particular hibiscus, I would look at the soil, the moisture, and also look at maybe if it got cold. That's part of the reason why you're losing some of the limbs. And then we're almost past the frost date. I would prune it back, and hopefully the thing will come back. You may have the plant in the pot for too long, so that might be another consideration. Beautiful, beautiful plants.
Okay, thanks. She also wanted to know, she said she put some red wiggler worms in a potted plant and wondering if it might have eaten the roots. And she also had potato starts in a large container that got eaten some. So was wondering about that.
Red wiggler worms don't eat vegetables or roots. They like rotted things. So one of the possibilities is here that if the manure was put in too fresh, it caused the roots to rot and then the worms ate them. But the worms themselves will not eat live growth.
Do you have some suggestions of what might have gotten some of these things first? I don't know.
Well, I would suspect that the manure was put in too fresh and caused some of the rotting.
Yeah.
That's the only.
Okay.
I researched it, and that was the most viable option.
Okay. Next, you want to know the best organic granular basic fertilizer for potted plants.
Master Gardeners does not recommend any particular product. So what I would suggest is go to a nursery or a retail outlet and look at the organic fertilizers that they have. Choose the one that fits what you're trying to do.
Okay.
So Pat Brenda also had a gopher question that we didn't actually answer because we did not say, talk about gopher wire on things. And if you do have raised beds, vegetable beds, you really want to put gopher wire under them to keep the gophers out of there and up the sides of the raised bed structure if it's a raised bed.
Okay, next question is from Marisol. How much compost to put on raised garden beds used for 2 crops of vegetables a year?
I would put 2 to 3 inches through the season. So in spring, I would put compost down. And then probably midsummer, I would put compost down.
Yeah, I use 2 inches in spring and 2 inches in fall. And it's the best thing you can do to your vegetable garden.
And she had another question, is setting spring summer irrigation timer for a 4x8 raised garden bed.
Irrigation timing depends on a lot of things, from water pressure to the size of the tubing you're using to the spacing of the outlets in the tubing. We have some fabulous stuff on our web on that, and I believe they've got the links to that, or we'll have in a minute in the chat. So what you really need to do is go to our website and find the calculator for it.
Okay. Next question. Julian, what can I do about leaves turning yellow on my lemon bush?
Lemon Bushes will lose some leaves through the winter. Lemons, as part of being a citrus, are very heavy feeders, so you need to be using a complete fertilizer on them. You may notice that the leaves will discolor. If you see the veins, it's going to be iron deficiency. If it's overall lacking color, it's going to be nitrogen. Another factor could be, even though we haven't had a lot of rain this year, is if the roots get really wet and rot, that's going to have the effect of causing the leaves to drop on it. Fertilizing, so there was a talk a while back, they suggested April, 1st of April, Memorial Day, 4th of July, and then Labor Day, 4 times to fertilize the citrus.
And use citrus fertilizer, not just any general fertilizer. There's special fertilizers for citrus.
Okay. Next question is from Jeanette, and unfortunately I didn't see her in the list today, but she wanted to know about raspberry care.
We have a fabulous video on the website, and I believe there's going to be a pointer to it in the chat. So, and there's also a pointer to another raspberry article. So I would really recommend going to our website for raspberries. Raspberries are complicated to describe because they have 2 kinds of canes, and it's just better if you have it written.
Okay, thanks. Vera had a question. How can a beginner successfully grow sweet peas in a pot or small planter on a covered patio? Also, when to plant, sun, water, and set are requirements for it?
So I grow sweet peas, and I soaked the seeds before I planted them, and I planted them in October, and they're just starting to take off onto the trellis. If you're going to put them in a pot, the regular sweet pea is just going to be too vigorous. So what you want to do is get, I think they're called knee-highs or some of the short ones. And I would say it's probably too late to be trying to seed. So you may want to go to a nursery and buy starts and look for the ones that are bush type, because I think that would work in your container. As for the sun, they like the sun right now, but as it starts to warm up, they don't like heat. In fact, sometime in the spring, they will stop producing flowers. So, and another part to it is once they start to flower, keep picking the blossoms or the shoots of the flowers, because if you don't, they will stop blooming on you. So, and another thing in a container, be really careful with the water. You can't let them dry out because they're going to be very unforgiving. So.
Thanks. Penny, I think you might have, Whitney had a question about, you know, the pumpkins and squash that take up a lot of room and wanting them put in the ground, and about needing gopher baskets, and wondering if should mulch with straw or other strategies.
If you were going to put them in the ground outside a vegetable bed, I would definitely put them in a gopher basket. But I'd also make the comment, in my garden, I have trellises along some of the beds, and I grow my squash, except for zucchini, all vertically. The stems of even a big pumpkin will hold up that pumpkin. You don't have to tie things up. And you know, then it's taking up almost no space. But if you are going to grow it in the ground, yes, a gopher basket, but gophers walk along over ground and they will quite likely eat your squash plant anyway, from the top down instead of from the bottom up.
Less depressing. Okay, next question is from Lisa. She has a few questions. The first being the best general purpose water soluble fertilizer for plants and vegetables. Again,
we do not recommend any specific product. Just go to your nursery and get there and take their advice.
Her next question of that is best slower growing native plants to grow under native oak trees.
There is on our website a particular listing of it. So they have things like columbines, some of the sedges, bush anemone. There's a big long list. One of the things with oaks, you need to be really careful to grow things that will go through the summer dry, because our native oak trees are, as being a Mediterranean climate, we have winter rain and then we don't have anything through the summer. So if you start to water plants underneath there, that's not going to be good for the tree. The other thing is you do not want to change the grade around an oak tree. So you need to be very protective of the oak if you want to put something underneath it.
Okay. Her next question is about Asian eggplant varieties that do well in Sonoma County and yield the most eggplants.
Well, I've planted a number of different eggplants. They've always done quite well for me. I plant what the nursery has because I believe they will have what will grow in my area. So I don't know if there is a best from my own experience. They're all just a little different, and each year is a little different, so it's hard to tell. Roger, do you have any experience on that?
I haven't grown eggplants, so I'm not that familiar with them, but I agree. If you go to the nursery, you should have those varieties that will grow. You also can talk to neighbors or people that are growing them and see which ones have worked for them.
I'm an experimenter, so I try different things every time. So.
And
you're a good person to talk to.
And, eggplants in general do fairly well, except for last year when the gophers took out every single one of my plants, eggplants and all. Oh, well.
And I think you'll get our website, which is up right now, has some listings. Next question from Marcia. The persimmon tree on my property, been there 7 years, produces ample fruit. 2 years back, it grew really tall in the center with teeny fruits lined up on tiny branches. They go from orangey to purple, then dry up. Before they dry, they taste okay, but what's up?
I'll take that one because I have 4 persimmon trees. What you have is a water sprout growing, and it's going straight up, and it will never fruit properly and it will never flower properly. What you want to do is just cut it off as close to its point of growth as possible. It's something that persimmons do. It's something that citrus do a lot too. So if you see a long, tall, fast-growing shoot coming out of the middle of your tree going straight upright, just cut it out. It's never going to be good for fruit.
Something I would add to that, citrus and persimmons, I believe, are grown on a rootstock, and be sure that the rootstock is not the thing that's coming up into the tree. So you want to know where that line is, and anything below, you want to keep that definitely out of the tree.
Absolutely. You can usually see the graft, so right near the soil line or slightly above it.
Okay, thanks. Next question, letter J. My roses have gotten leggy or spindly and are flowering much less. The only info I can find is that roses become that way if they're too close together or have not been pruned. This is not at all the case with mine. They're well spaced apart, and I prune them in January each year as advised and fertilize them beginning in the spring. So.
I don't know if that person, we could ask the question, but we just have discussed this, and we're thinking that has the sunlight changed in the garden? so that the plant is looking for light. And so that's why it's very leggy and not producing flowers for you.
You want to prune them hard in winter too, right?
Right. And you want to renew the canes on them, at least on some of the types of roses.
Okay. Next question is from Stella. Something has eaten away at the edges of my Myers lemon tree. What's going on and how can I get rid of it?
That could be snails or slugs, or it could be weevils would be the other, which is a type of beetle that will get up in the tree. You can tell the difference between them. The snail will have kind of a cut edge where you can see where it's been, the outer part of the leaf has been scraped off. And the weevil, it'll be just a very quick or very sharp cut that you'll see. So I would say go out in the evening with a flashlight, and I would check and see what it is. If it's snails and slugs, I don't know if you have debris or anything that the snails and slugs can hide in, but you'd want to get rid of that. And for the beetles, you could probably, I don't know if you could use tanglefoot on the bottom or something like that. But
if you get tanglefoot, make sure there's more than one kind, and one kind traps birds. So make sure you get the right kind.
I think Stella is in the room. Do you have anything to add, Stella? Tell us about your problem a little more.
I don't think I saw her.
I see Stella. Stella,
I'm here.
Yeah, Stella. We actually couldn't understand what you meant. Can you explain it?
Stella's not in.
Yeah, she's here.
Oh,
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's gotten all the leaves, and they are all the leaf edges are very jagged. It's a dwarf, and it's probably been there for 5-6 years. So whatever it is, it's really ravenous because I think it's pretty much all the leaves, and then they're a little yellowish too, not completely, but.
So is this something that's started happening recently? And do you have other citrus that are affected?
I don't have any citrus nearby it. I have some in pots that are away from it. And it started last year. That rose beetle one, if you scroll back up, it's kind of like that, but it doesn't look
not like this. Roger, you were saying about the weevils that they have a jagged edge?
they have a jagged edge, but it's a very sharp cut. That's the difference between the snail and the slug.
Yeah, I would say it's a sharp cut.
Right. So that's probably a weevil. It could be a ground beetle would be another thing that would get up in there. But I would go out at night with a flashlight and see exactly what it is that I've got. And then I would go to the UC IPM site and go to citrus, and it lists all the different things that could be doing what you're describing, and it gives suggestions for control.
Citrus minor, I see there.
If I could interject here, I did.
Can I open it, or can I open it?
Yeah. Somebody, you guys need to mute somebody.
If I could interject here, you know, I had a weevil problem one year on, it was actually an orange tree. But what I found is, at least in that case, I didn't have to do anything. Yeah, the leaves didn't look great, but it didn't interfere with the citrus production and that. So, you know, I just kind of tolerated some leaves that looked bad. And, you know, other than that, I didn't really suffer ill effects. So that's probably why it's important to find out exactly what it is. But just as an aside,
it has produced some lemons. But are you saying that I would be able to see weevils at night with a flashlight? I know that you mean that for snails, but do you also think I would see these beetles?
I would think you could see the beetles. I've never personally gone and done it, but the fact that you're not seeing them during the day, then, you know, the next thing would be at night.
Yeah. Just to let you know, they tend to kind of hide really well during the daytime. So, and like I said, they're not, you know, necessarily the easiest things to find because they're just this brown bug, you know. But you might just take a look, you know, at underneath the underside of leaves and things like that to see, because like I said, they tend to stay, you know, kind of out of sight during the day.
I would suggest that you take a picture of the damage and email it to our information desk, because sometimes it's really difficult just by description.
I actually have a picture on my camera. Can you give me?
It's a little bit hard to do that here, but could you email us the picture to the information desk?
Yes. Go to the website, the top right-hand corner, you'll get a link.
Yes.
That would be the best way, because usually identifying the problem is, it takes some time, you know, that needs to be some research to be done.
Right.
But you have lemons and you have new leaves?
I have lemons. I haven't really looked to see if there are new leaves.
Okay. Did you have blossoms? No.
I can't say because I haven't stopped to look at it lately. Okay. I have another question about my peony tree. Is that okay?
Yeah.
After it blooms, you know, it leaves the head of the flower or whatever, some hard pod. When am I supposed to prune that off?
What kind of tree was it?
A peony.
Oh, tree. Peony. Roger, do you know about peonies?
Not offhand, but I would say if it's like other things, unless you want it to go to seed, you would take it off after it's done blooming.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Was it a tree peony or herbaceous? Because I grow both.
Tree peony.
Pardon?
Tree.
Tree. Sometimes I pull off the bud afterwards. Sometimes I've just left it alone and it still pushes out new buds each year.
Thanks.
Okay. I actually think Stella had another question. She planted fava beans last fall and wanted to know how she turn them into fertilizer compost.
We laughed at this question because so many of us said we like to eat the fava beans. But ideally, if you're growing them just as a cover crop, you cut them off before or just as they're beginning to flower, and just drop the cut plant onto the bed. If you want to eat the bean, then when it's done fruiting, then cut it down, and again just leave the. If the stem is kind of woody, then you probably want to take the leaves off the stem, but otherwise you can just leave it on the bed and it'll return the nitrogen to the bed.
So you don't necessarily recommend that it be cut up, that the plants be cut up fine
cut it up as much as you're willing to, it'll decompose faster, but it isn't completely necessary. What you don't want to do is to dig it in, because we recommend no-till gardening. It's just better for the creatures that live in the soil. So if you can leave it laying on top.
And is the current advice to leave the old roots in the ground from your vegetable garden the previous year?
Very much so. There's all kinds of mycorrhizae chains attached to those roots, and a new plant coming along can make use of those chains. So you want to leave them in place.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Next question is from Stephanie, and I'll say I don't think she's on, but I could. What flowers can be planted now?
You can go to the nursery. I think I've been there and seen pansies, and it's getting late and going to be warm. So you're going to want to go for things like petunias and zinnia and cosmos and impatiens in shady areas. But go to a nursery if need be. You can ask someone there and just make sure that you're not getting any of the winter annuals, because as it starts to warm up, they're going to die off and you won't have anything through the spring, late spring and summer.
Your local nurseries will know your area and be able to direct you to the things that are right to plant now.
Okay, next question is from Bonnie. How to prevent aphids and the larvae of a white moth from raised vegetable beds, and does spraying them off squash blossoms make the blossoms not bare?
Aphids are something that you can wash off for the most part. And then for the larva that's eating things, you could probably just go pick them off, would be the easiest thing. And as for the water on the squash blossoms, I looked hard and didn't see anything that it has an effect on the flowers. Squash plants have a male and a female flower, so you want to be sure. You can pollinize it yourself, or Mother Nature will do it for you.
Also, there's a sort of a folk way to deal with the white cabbage butterflies if you're a little artistic. Supposedly, and I'm not sure I believe this, but I have heard it in a Master Gardener class, that the white cabbage butterflies will not go to a bed where there's another one there that's a competitor. Now, if it's its mate or whatever, then they'll probably go there. But if you take a metal stake and tie a little bit of white cloth to it that looks like a butterfly, doesn't have to be particularly artistic, it just has to have two little lobes on it, then in theory the white cabbage butterfly will say, oh no, there's somebody there already, and fly off elsewhere. I've heard it works. That's for people to try if they feel like it.
If only that worked for gophers. Okay.
Yeah.
Next question from Julia. I need help identifying some ground covers or plants that will help with erosion control of a 30-degree slope that are very fire tolerant.
Roger, you want to do that? Or
I'll take a stab at it. There is a program within Sonoma County Master Gardeners called Garden Sense. And you can go to the site and you can register, and somebody will come out and will look at your garden. And besides looking at plants that would work for you, they look at your irrigation system. And there is also on the website, there's a Water Smart Plant Guide. And if you go to it, there's a whole section on ground covers. And so they have a lot of our native manzanitas, ceanothus, and some other things. So I would start there. You have anything to add, Penny?
No, I was going to ask if Julia is here because it would really help to know what kinds of plants she was looking for. I have much of the same problem, but I also have dogs, so I don't particularly want to cover the entire slope with things that the dogs can't run through. And I have found that stuff like dichondra, which grows wild here, is actually extremely effective because it keeps the other weeds out. I've also used diamondia in an area, and it has pretty yellow flowers, which is nice. Needs a little bit of water occasionally. And then there's all kinds of other small things, but without knowing what the particulars are of what she's looking for, her best bet is to look at the lists on a website.
I don't think Julia's here, but I've been wrong before. So I don't want to commit myself, but I didn't see her name.
I didn't either.
That concludes our pre-submitted questions. I'm taking a look through the chat right now. There was one question from Mary about the earliest that we can plant lettuce. She lives in Roanoke Park.
And with a row cover, you can plant it anytime from now on or previously.
Okay. Okay.
Lettuce is a cold weather crop, so you could plant it all through our January. In our winter here, just keep it going, right?
And in the fall, not in the middle of summer.
In the summer, it starts bolting, so you should try to do it when the weather is cooler.
There are some heat-resistant varieties that actually work quite well, but I don't get as much heat as some other places do.
I always tell people the reason why a Greek salad, because I'm Greek, doesn't have lettuce is because lettuce bolts. So a summer salad just has tomatoes and carrots. So you have think of it that the lettuces are in the spring or in the cooler and wetter season.
Yeah.
Okay. There were some questions on purchasing tools, but I think that got answered about any, well-stocked nursery, and that should carry some of these. Another question from Susan was, what kind of oil to put on clean tools? Best way to sharpen the tools?
Mineral oil or olive oil, depends on.
Yeah, I can answer that. I put an answer. This is Ellen who gave the presentation. Oh, yeah. I put an answer in the chat box that I use this exotic flower oil that I get from a store in Berkeley that's a Japanese supplier, but that's expensive, and I just like the smell of it. However, you can use Pam, or you can use canola oil or any plant-based oil. Just don't saturate it, wipe it off. With regard to sharpening, I use this exotic Japanese tool that was shown in the picture, but you can just go to the hardware store and get a stone and use that as well. Penny, you use an interesting tool. What is the tool that you use?
Well, the little diamond sharpener. It's about six inches long or so, and it's again from a Japanese tool supplier. But it's really nice because you can keep it in your pocket.
Mm-hmm. So, Roger, what do you use for sharpening?
I have a little tool that I got at one of the irrigation. It's got probably a 4-inch handle, and it's got a carbide head on it. And I just use that to go down my blades, just to sharpen them.
I hope that answers the question. I'm sure there are, just many of them, but you just want to make certain that it's going to do the job. And in many cases with some of these tools, you need to wet the tool before you sharpen. So I would talk to the, to the seller, the retailer, and find out, what is the best way to proceed.
Okay. I see that we probably have time to answer maybe one more question out of this. So I'm trying to look here. From Whitney, she said, I realize now I am disrupting the soil too much when I weed, but I always heard it was important to get the root out, especially for invasives like broom and thistle. Should I cut them off at the base and leave the root to avoid soil disruption, or pull the root with minimum disruption?
With the broom, you want to pull it and get the root out, because if you cut it off, it's going to resprout. So that would be the way to get rid of it.
Okay. Okay. Let's see, maybe one additional question. This is from Mary. I pruned our cherry tree last year and it now has outshoots from the trunk of leaves. Should I cut these off or let them grow?
I'd cut them off. They're water sprouts.
Say again where the sprouts are from? The trunk. And
Mary says outshoots from the trunk of leaves. Is Mary there?
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, I see it.
Okay.
I'm here. So what it is they're little clusters of leaves from the trunk. There's probably about eight different areas, and they're just scattered up the trunk. You know, little cluster, like maybe 8 or 9 leaves all together.
I don't think they're doing any harm.
Okay.
So do whatever seems appropriate, just depending on the way you want the tree to look.
Okay. If I leave them, they may grow into branches.
You'll see very, very quickly if there's a branch.
Okay.
Coming out there. If it's a place you want a branch, then leave it and see.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I actually see one more question here if we get it in real quick from Michael. He planted, I see, or just answered it. I planted my veggies in 2x4 foot metal troughs last year using soil from Grab and Grow. What is the best amendment to use to develop the soil in the container, or do I have to replace the soil? And I think Eartha was saying compost is best.
Roger.
I think Eartha answered it.
Yep.
Using compost.
Compost.
She lists a couple brands. We don't make recommendations, but compost would be the thing to add to the soil to keep it going.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I think
at least 4 inches a year.
Yeah. We're kind of nearing here our end and probably need to wrap it up. I think we made it through most of the questions. What I'm going to say again, if you have any other questions, please send them, into our Master Gardener desk. You can find it. You can submit them. Look at our webpage. And also remember that we've posted these various links in the chat box, but we'll also create a PDF that has these links. You'll be able to find the reference links if you go to the posting of this YouTube video under Sonoma County Master Gardeners, under comments, there'll be a link to the PDF. So since we're almost at the end, hopefully we've answered, most of your questions. You can also attend and submit questions to our next Ask the Master Gardener, which is scheduled for April the 28th. And it'll be like every 4th Wednesday of the following month. So you can kind of put it on your calendar, register, submit questions there, or attend and submit questions. And, all of our upcoming Zoom and webinar talks can be found on our homepage. I can't say enough how much of a wealth of information the Master Gardener website is. And can we open down that? I'm just reading the chart. I mean, we have everything out there. It's just amazing how much is out. So please do check out the
and in many cases with some of these tools, you need to wet the tool before you sharpen. So I would talk to the to the seller, the retailer, and find out what is the best way to proceed.
Okay. I see that we probably have time to answer maybe one more question out of this. So I'm trying to look here. From Whitney, she says, I realize now I am disrupting the soil too much when I weed, but I always heard it was important to get the root out, especially for invasives like broom and thistle. Should I cut them off at the base and leave the root to avoid soil disruption, or pull the root with minimum disruption?
With the broom, you want to pull it and get the root out, because if you cut it off, it's going to resprout. So that would be the way to get rid of it.
Okay. Okay. Let's see, maybe one additional question. This is from Mary. I pruned our cherry tree last year and it now has outshoots from the trunk of leaves. Should I cut these off or let them grow?
I cut them off. They're water sprouts.
Say again where the sprouts are from? The trunk. And
Mary says outshoots from the trunk of leaves. Is Mary there?
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, I see it.
Okay.
I'm here. So what it is they're little clusters of leaves from the trunk. There's probably about eight different areas, and they're just scattered up the trunk. Little cluster, like maybe 8 or 9 leaves all together.
I don't think they're doing any harm.
Okay.
So do whatever seems appropriate, just depending on the way you want the tree to look.
Okay. If I leave them, they may grow into branches.
You'll see very, very quickly if there's a branch.
Okay.
Coming out there. If it's a place you want a branch, then leave it and see.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I actually see one more question here if we get it in real quick from Michael. He planted, I see, or just answered it. I planted my veggies in 2x4 foot metal troughs last year using soil from Grab and Grow. What is the best amendment to use to develop the soil in the container, or do I have to replace the soil? And I think Eartha was saying compost is best.
Roger.
Well, I think Eartha answered it.
Yep.
Using compost.
Compost.
She lists a couple brands. We don't make recommendations, but compost would be the thing to add to the soil to keep it going.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I think
at least 4 inches a year.
Yeah. We're kind of nearing here our end and probably need to wrap it up. I think we made it through most of the questions. What I'm going to say again, if you have any other questions, please send them, into our Master Gardener desk. You can find it. You can submit them. Look at our webpage. And also remember that we've posted these various links in the chat box, but we'll also create a PDF that has these links. You'll be able to find the reference links if you go to the posting of this YouTube video under Sonoma County Master Gardeners, under comments, there'll be a link to the PDF. So since we're almost at the end, hopefully we've answered, most of your questions. You can also attend and submit questions to our next Ask the Master Gardener, which is scheduled for April the 28th. And it'll be like every 4th Wednesday of the following month. So you can kind of put it on your calendar, register, submit questions there, or attend and submit questions. And, all of our upcoming Zoom and webinar talks can be found on our homepage. I can't say enough how much of a wealth of information the Master Gardener website is. And can we open down that? I'm just reading the chart. I mean, we have everything out there. It's just amazing how much is out. So please do check out the website. In addition of looking at upcoming events and that. And let's see, explore, again, as I said, we're out on YouTube. We've recorded, you know, various talks. The links are out there. Also, if you have your cell phone with you and you want to scan the QR code that's up right now, it'll take you to the list of our upcoming events. So basically, that's about wrapping it up for today. We thank you so very much for attending and hoping that it's helped you today and we've been able to answer some of your questions. We very much look forward to being able to help you in the future. And now I will probably leave and go work on my own problems outside. So thanks again.
Thank you.
Thanks.